would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and work, the Gundungurra land and people. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. I also want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which you, our listeners, are joining us from today. I recognise the deep connection that First Nations people have to this land, their enduring culture, and their commitment to the preservation and care for their country. This land was never ceded, and it always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Welcome to Beyond the Surface. This is a space for conversations that sit at the edges of faith, identity, power, and recovery, especially for those of us who have been shaped, stretched, or harmed by fundamental religion or high control systems. Some episodes are personal, some are reflective, some are educational or curious or quietly disruptive. All of them are grounded in lived experience and a deep respect for the complexity of leaving, questioning, and rebuilding meaning. We will be talking about religious trauma, various forms of abuse, cult dynamics, queerness, and recovery, not in neat answers, but in honest conversations. In listening to these conversations, some parts might be heavy or activating for you. Please take care of yourself while listening and feel free to pause or step away if you need to. I'm Sam, and I'm really glad that you're here with us. Welcome, Chris. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
I feel like this interview's been a long time coming. I feel like it's
Yes,
taken
it
a while.
has. Yes, it
I
has
feel like
taken
it was
months.
part of it was my fault because I just like had so many people I was reaching out to and like it just perpetually got longer and longer and longer.
No, this
And
was
then
definitely my fault. This is my fault.
well, we're not here to lay blame, but I'm just glad you're here. It's good.
Me
So
too.
for people who don't know you, where in the world are you at the moment?
I live in Sydney.
Beautiful.
Yeah, Biddigal and Gadigal country. And yeah, that's, yeah.
Beautiful. Lovely. I love to start these episodes with something super vague,
Yeah.
big, broad question. Where does your story start?
Oh my gosh, where does my story start? A long way back, approximately 40 years. No, um, my story starts when I was a kid, I
Hmm.
think. Growing up in church.
Hmm.
Um, grew up in a charismatic Baptist church,
Okay.
which was a little bit unusual. I guess I
Okay.
remember my first memories of church are from the 90s, and I would have been 7 or 8,
Mm.
um, and going to this charismatic Baptist church. And I remember that it became quite controversial because this particular church was having healing nights
Oh,
and it was in the paper and it was on the news, which was a big deal back then. I know now everything's on somewhere, but back then that was a big deal,
yeah.
because, people were, apparently being healed or going, yeah, something was going on. And
Mm.
I just remember being, um, I was talking to my parents about this the other day, just from a child's perspective, what it was like to be at a church where adults were behaving strangely,
Mm.
where people were being prayed over and they were falling over, and people were, roaring like lions, or were, they'd be being prayed over and they'd be weeping or screaming. Um, and I remember being distressed at times as a kid because it felt um, like the adults in your world are supposed to be the ones that kind of have it all together. And it just felt really, not that I would have articulated this at the time, but thinking back to it, I remember feeling like, what's going on, and feeling a bit unsafe at times because so many things were happening around, and it wasn't an unsafe place. Um, and you know, I enjoyed parts of it, but I do remember that feeling of sort of like, who's kind of in, like, is anyone here like of a sound mind, at
I
any one
mean,
time that's
like,
kind
who's
of,
the grown up here?
yes, well, kind of, and I
Yeah.
mean, it was the 90s. So back then the kids in the church, we used to go play down in the car park underground, and like all the parents would be upstairs falling over and doing all that stuff. Not saying that disrespectfully. Uh,
Yeah.
and then we would go up, and I remember, I mean, we were like 7 or 8 or something. And so I remember being prayed over and falling backwards and stuff. And I mean, I don't know that I did it consciously at the time, but I'm pretty sure I faked it a few times.
Yeah.
As kids would, I mean, when you're
Absolutely.
seeing adults around you doing it. So
Yeah.
anyway,
It's like mimicking
um,
behavior.
yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a few memories from that time, and they all kind of smushed together for me,
Mm.
probably between the ages of like 7 and 12. At some point in that period, I have a vivid memory of um, uh, a person, my childhood friend's father, actually, who I knew very well, saying to my dad that someone had come in off the street and asked for healing because they were gay, homosexual. And so they'd come off the street. And so they had prayed over this person. And I remember hearing my friend's father say, "Oh, and this guy, we prayed for him, and seven demons came out of him. Bam, 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 like this." And it was like, I don't know if they knew that I was listening,
Mm.
but it freaked me out because at that point, I knew that I was gay, even though I hadn't sort of fully admitted to myself. I did know. Um, and I started thinking, what if I've got a demon in me?
Yeah.
Because if that gay man had 7 demons, and I've started to notice that I
Mm.
am definitely attracted to males, then I must, there must be at least one demon inside me. And that was a really frightening thing, especially I think because of like I'd seen people being prayed over and screaming. Like, when you grow up in a church like that, I'm not saying they're bad, but
Yeah.
when you grow up in a church like that and see that kind of stuff, and then you go, hold on, what if I've got one in me? And you've heard something that really makes it seem like that could be real.
Mm.
And you've grown up believing completely in demons and in, spiritual warfare and all of that stuff. It's terrifying. And I remember being very scared of that and praying over and over and over again, just that God would take the demon out of me, or that, he'd protect me from it.
Yeah.
Um,
Was that the first time you had
yeah,
heard people around you talking about someone who was gay?
no, I feel like, so I can't ever remember hearing an explicit sermon or anything on gay people,
Yeah.
but I do remember knowing
Mm.
very strongly that gay people were considered um, disordered, but not only that, it was linked somehow to pedophilia.
Yeah.
And I remember my dad saying a few things because I asked a few questions one time. We were driving through King's Cross, and mum and dad were talking about something they probably shouldn't have been talking about in front of me. And I had a question, and I sort of said, what, why would people do that? And
Yeah.
I just remember that there was I can't remember what the conversation was, but there was some link made
Mm.
between homosexuals and pedophiles,
Yeah.
which again, unfortunately, was not uncommon in the early 90s.
No.
That people would sort of, this idea that gay people were dangerous for children.
Yeah.
I mean, even like back, you know, was it the 60s when like the Anita Bryant crusade, like over in the US, that big
Yeah.
thing about save our kids.
Yeah.
Like
I
that
feel
was
like it's
still,
not get it's feel like it's only gotten marginally better, to be fair, where
yeah,
like the
like it's
drag
changed.
conversation
It's
and things
changed
like
a
that
bit.
still.
It's
Yeah.
definitely changed a bit, but
Yeah.
I mean, certainly I remember in the early 90s that there was that, and like I was aware of it.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how I became aware of it, but I do remember it's like, kids hear things, like this is the thing. You say things are said in church, whether it's an overheard conversation, like me with my dad's friend or with my friend's dad, um, or if it's from the pulpit, it doesn't matter. Those
Mm.
things that children hear are absorbed
Yeah.
and they carry a lot of weight because, especially in like a faith community or something like that, it's like as a child, you hear it and you think these people know what they're talking about. You know,
Yeah.
these are my trustworthy adults. They're part of my trusted community.
Yeah.
And so, um, so it wasn't the first time that I'd heard anything about
Mm.
gay people, but certainly it's probably the most memorable because for me, because it was just so scary,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember what you, and this might be a really tricky question, but do you remember what you as a child did with that fear? Like, what did you do with it?
Um, I was a very anxious child.
Yeah.
And uh, unfortunately, I carried that fear along with the fear of hell, which was a very real fear for me,
Yeah.
and the fear that suddenly the rapture was going to happen and that I would be left behind.
And how's the last
Those,
few weeks been
all of
for
these,
you?
oh my gosh, I'm fine now.
Oh,
I'm fine now. But
I'm
like
so glad.
honestly, as a child, and even I like honestly, as a teenager and as an older teenager too, I
Yeah.
was absolutely terrified of the
Oh,
rapture happening
yeah.
and that I was going to be left.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter how much, and even honestly, even into my 20s, because even how no matter how hard I tried to be evangelical or to be,
Mm,
a really good Christian or to be, and like I loved Jesus,
mm,
but I just had this feeling it's not enough because I'm so bad. Something within me is broken and something within me is so repugnant to God that I'm going to be left behind. And so I carried all of those fears with me from a very young age. I really held on to them
mm,
into adulthood. Um, and so I think what the way that kind of worked itself out for me was that I developed a really severe case of OCD
mm.
that had a lot of religious uh, sort of religiosity attached
Yep.
to it. Um, and like when I say severe OCD, I don't mean I was a clean
You're
freak.
particular. No.
No, no.
No,
I
no. Yeah.
mean, so I had the hand washing thing, but like I was washing my hands till they would bleed.
Yeah.
Um, and but beyond that, it was more than that. It was ritual praying, ritual, um, like sort of how do I say it? So I had like scripts that I
Mm.
would go through as ritual prayers or ritual rebukes of the devil,
Yep.
that would make me feel like, okay, if God comes back right now, I'll be okay. Do you know what I mean? But then, of course, 5 seconds later,
You have to do it all over again.
don't feel like I'm okay. I
Yeah.
have to redo it. And so these ritual prayers and these sort of it took over everything. And it was to the point where getting dressed in the morning would take, you know, a significant amount of time. So this is a breakdown of me getting dressed at one
Yeah.
point was I would have to get all my clothes out and lay them without touching on the bed, but I'd take one item out, put it on the bed, shut the drawer, walk around the room 3 times thinking about certain things or praying these ritual prayers,
Mm.
get back to the drawer, open the drawer, put it out. Do that. That takes ages. It had to feel right. It had to feel like I had to mean the prayers. So it wasn't like a sloppy kind of like, I just need to get through this. It was like my whole mind and body had to be
Yeah.
focused, and it was so tiring. And more often than not, I would make a mistake or I would feel like I didn't mean that enough, and everything had to go back in the drawer and I had to start again. And so it would take, like, sometimes, hours to do things.
Yeah.
Um, I developed a really significant fear of, this will sound really stupid. I don't know how to explain this without it sounding silly because it is a ridiculous concept. But somewhere I got this idea that, um, you know, that you could sell your soul for things.
Hmm.
And of course, with OCD, you have a lot of intrusive thoughts, right? And so the intrusive thought that I would have was, if I ever wanted something, even something like a glass of water, the thought would pop into my head, oh, I'd sell my soul for that. And then I would have to, um, I mean, I'd freak out and I'd go through, but Jesus, and like go through these prayers over and over and over again. And then, I'd make up a little rule to say, I'm not allowed to have that drink of water until the clock turns over past midnight, because then it's a new day. And somehow that made it, like just weird. It's people with OCD listening here will probably
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I think that's how all those fears that I had really manifested themselves with it was very severe OCD.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I have memories also of walking around the school. I went to a Christian school and really being like frightened. This was when I was older, I was probably 14 or 15, but really being frightened that I might have a demon in me that was like causing this
Mm.
uh, broken sexuality, in me, and causing me to not feel like the way that I knew that I was supposed to feel according to everything that I'd ever known,
Yeah.
you know. Um, I had grown up in a bubble, so um, and by that I mean I went to a Christian school, I went to church on the weekend.
Yeah.
All of my friends were Christian. And like when I say Christian, I mean active Christians,
Yeah.
not nominal, like
Yeah.
active
Not
Christians.
the
And so
lukewarm
yeah,
every like
no, but
Easter
really
Christmas
that was
kind.
but like, and
Yeah.
I went to a small Christian school where probably 90%, I reckon, of the families that put their kids there were evangelical Christians that were actively involved in
Yeah.
church and whatever else. So I really didn't have
Mm.
any outside input,
Yeah.
you know? And so my worldview was tiny,
Yeah.
even as a 16-year-old. Yeah.
I mean, I know that we'll talk a lot about like the way that, the church and your sexuality and all of that are
Yeah.
intertwined, but I'm curious how your family, like your parents and the church responded to the OCD.
Well, thankfully, the church, I know it sounds like one of those churches, but the church was not the type of church that would say that mental illness was caused by a demon, thankfully,
Great, we love that
which
at
is
least.
great. And so I was diagnosed with OCD quite quickly,
Okay.
I think around the age of 13.
Yeah.
But I think because I wasn't able to be honest with anyone about my true fears, which were
Yeah.
about my sexuality,
Yeah.
um, I went for years going to see Christian counselors or psychologists, but really nothing helped because I wasn't able to be truly honest with anyone.
Yeah.
So it was largely unhelped. And it got worse and worse
Mm.
uh, as I got older. And in the end, so I was also very Christian, like, you know,
Yeah, I mean,
very,
I do like to
very.
ask early on in these episodes, like, who was God to you throughout all of this? Like, what
Um,
was your faith like?
so I feel like my faith had kind of two parts to it. There
Mm.
was one part of my faith where I was like, I know that I love Jesus.
Yeah.
I know that I really genuinely love God and I want to serve him. I want to do the right thing.
Mm.
You know, loved going to church when I was older because I went to a different church, had made friends there.
Yeah.
Um, I really felt, yeah, I didn't question whether Jesus was real. It was just something that I knew, you
Yeah.
know. So there was that side of it. But on the other side, I was extremely legalistic,
Mm.
evangelical to the point of like, I mean, I had questions about how I didn't have questions about whether God was real or about whether the Bible was real or whether Jesus was real. I had questions about, how do I know that I've ticked all the boxes? How do I know that I've done everything? How do I know that this verse doesn't mean that I should be, for example, giving away everything that I own?
Yeah.
What if
Yeah.
it means that literally, and so I was evangelical to that point, and very like I would have these things and then I would give away like I was really full on,
Yeah.
and that was I was a weird child. I think I must have been a bit strange because I asked my parents at 15 if I could move schools. I didn't want to go to the Christian school anymore. I wanted to go to a public school because
Don't
I
say you wanted
wanted,
to evangelize.
yeah,
Oh my
I
gosh.
did. Well, it wasn't quite so like
Oh,
I'm gonna save everyone. It wasn't like that. It was more like I don't have any non-Christian friends.
yeah.
And at youth group, we talk a lot about telling our non-Christian friends about Jesus.
Yeah.
And I don't know any non-Christians. There is no one in my world that's non-Christian. And I really wanted to share that with people because the Jesus that I loved was a loving,
Yeah.
gracious God, even though I there was this other side of it that where I couldn't accept that for myself,
Yeah.
and God was a scary, angry God, but the God that I felt like I could share with people was this loving, beautiful, wonderful God.
Yeah.
Um, and I really genuinely wanted to share that with people. And so I asked my parents if I could go to a public school, and they were like, "Why?" I remember sort of telling teachers at the Christian school about that, and they were like, "Why would you want to go to that school? That's a rough school, like, oh, Chris, no, I don't think that'll be good for you," because I was gay.
Yeah.
I'm sure everyone knew it. Like, it wasn't exactly, you know, yeah, I wasn't straight acting, let's just say
Yeah.
that. Um, and I was also this hyper Christian. So I was like this walking kind of, I
Mm,
don't know, like contradiction.
yeah.
But uh but I think another part of that also, if I'm being truthful, was also that the OCD had become so uh it had taken over every part of my life, and so kids at school had started to notice.
Oh,
Um, and I was doing strange things and actions during the day that were to alleviate, obviously, my anxiety and fears, but would have looked crazy,
yeah.
like walking backwards or like shaking my head, if I had a intrusive thought and shaking my head, like, obsessively.
Yeah.
So I think part of it was also I just need a clean start. I just need to go somewhere else. So I think there was a couple of different reasons,
Yeah.
if I'm honest. But yeah, when I moved to this school, wow, like I look back on it and I cringe. Like I was so cringy. Like I
Um,
I would struggle to like me. Like now, looking back, I'm like,
I
wow,
often say the same thing.
that was no, but wait for it. It was full on. I was 15,
Yeah.
okay? I've rocked up at this public school. I don't know anyone. Don't
Yeah.
know anyone. Rocked up. Um, Kids immediately saw that I was like a weirdo, I think,
Yep.
or
And new, at
I was
least.
odd,
Yeah.
new, but also that I was a bit strange. Keeping in mind that I had grown up in a bubble, I didn't know anything. I wasn't allowed to watch The Simpsons. Like I was not allowed to read Harry Potter.
Yep.
Like it was all that stuff. And so um, there was a lot of things that I just hadn't engaged with before that were normal, in the real world,
Yeah.
for kids my age. And so the first thing I did, and this was on the second day at this new school, I decided that I was going to invite everyone to my baptism. And so I spent all night on my computer on, um, making these invitations, and they had little cartoon characters on them.
Oh,
Like,
bless.
honestly, I swear, I just want to I want to go back in time and like throttle myself. And it was like, yeah. And anyway, I reckon I printed probably about 100 of them.
Oh,
And I walked around the school with this bundle of ridiculous invitations, and I was handing them out to everyone. And when I say that it was met with ridicule, like
yeah.
I cannot overstate how ridiculed I was. And I was not confused, but I sort of thought, I really don't know how to make friends here. You
Yeah.
know, um, there were some kids that I recognized from, I didn't know them, but I knew that they were Christians or that they went to youth group because they went to a youth group from the church down the road from mine, and we'd done some United events.
Yep.
And so I recognized them and I was like, oh my gosh, they're going to be my friends. And it I learnt very quickly on the first day that they were the cool kids or in the cool kids group, and they did not want to be my friend at all.
Oh,
And they were embarrassed of me as well because I was saying that I was a Christian, whatever else.
yeah.
I think I got the nickname Christian Chris on like my first day of school there. Anyway, so handing out these invitations,
I feel like we
and
might have actually been friends in high school, Chris.
I,
In year six, I got
you would have
nominated
pitied
to
me.
be
That's what it would have been. But actually, do you know what? So this is actually a really great story, actually. Like I love it because it's true and it's just
yeah.
I don't know. It really taught me something at the time. I remember my first day. I rocked up to science
Mm.
and sort of got left outside the room. Everyone else was already in there. Knocked on the door and they said, "Come in." And like you know, the new kid walks in and it's just awful. Sit down in the front row, whatever. And the lesson kind of washed over me, but I remember partway through they said, "Oh, turn to the people around you and start talking about this concept." We were learning about light. And I turn around and this kid behind me, the only reference I had to what this kid looked like was Marilyn Manson. Like he was full gothic, wearing makeup, everything, black hair, and I remember he was he was sitting there. This sounds very dramatic, but he was sitting there leaning forward and he had black hair coming over his eyes and he was just tapping his black nails and sort of looking at me like this. And I immediately was like, dear Jesus, please protect me. Like I was like, oh my God, start, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Like I saw that he had a pentagram around his neck and I was like, oh, he's a witch. Oh my goodness, I've heard about, witches
Yeah.
and whatever else. And like, I went like evangelical crazy. Um, I wasn't unkind and he didn't notice me doing any of this, I don't think. He probably saw that I was a bit like, oh, like a
Taken
bit shocked.
aback. Yeah.
Anyway, so whatever, handed out all my invitations to anyone that would take them. And I had kids sort of take them and then screw them up and chuck them. I had one kid, he was skipping class, I think, and I was late to class. And he was smoking a cigarette. And I walked past him and he goes, hey, new kid, are you hanging? you handing out invitations? Oh, can I have one? Thanks, buddy. Oh, thank you. And I was like, no worries, get it out of my, give it to him. And I just remember I was walking off and I was like, thank you, Jesus. That was amazing. Turn around and I just see him setting it on fire with his,
Oh my
like,
goodness.
like it was just, that
Oh,
was,
your poor little heart.
look, listen, like honestly, I had to go through it. I had
Oh,
to realize, I realized very quickly I have grown up in a way that has made me very strange. And I knew that I must be strange. And it
yeah,
was probably a good thing that I went through that because I needed to know.
yeah.
It was many years before I would realize what not strange meant, but there you go. But anyway, long story short, what happened was I got to the end of that first week and I had, 20 or 30 invitations left. And these two girls came up to me and they were kind of the punky looking kids.
Mm.
Um, and they came up and they said, "Oh, you're Christian Chris, right?" I was like, "Yeah, I guess." And they said, um, you're handing out invitations. Can we have some?" And by then I was like a bit wary and I was like, "Yeah, of course you can." Not getting my hopes up, gave it to them. And they were like, "Okay, cool, thanks. See ya." I didn't think anything of it. I found out later that those two girls had talked to their whole group, which included the boy that was sitting behind me in science, and had said, that new kid, Christian Chris, is handing out invitations to his baptism. We should all go. And on the Sunday, they all showed up.
Oh,
They were sitting in the back row. There was six or seven of them. I can remember all of them, so I could count it but it's not important. But there was six or seven of them, and they watched me get baptized.
oh,
And I mean, they looked so out of place. It was so funny. Like they, yeah, they were like, and like, the Gothic kids showed up in this fabulous, I mean, amazing out, just the campus. It was like a shiny PVC black with on purple on the inside, I think, black, um, you know, coat that went all the way down to it. He had these huge boots on. He looked amazing. And,
they're
of
very out of
course,
place.
has anyone seen anyone like this before in church? It was, yeah. But I was over the moon and I
Oh,
was just like, oh my gosh, like, wow, people actually came. And I've got this beautiful photo of us. Actually, I wish I'd brought it. I've got a
yeah.
beautiful photo of me with this big smile on my face, looking very, right after my baptism, and like these like punky gothic kids standing around me for this photo, and they became my friends. And so they were my friends through years 10, 11, and 12. And thank God for them. But it was very funny because the people that I thought would be friends with me, which were the Christian kids, wanted absolutely nothing to do with me. And these kids were so gracious, and I'm sure I was entertaining. They found me very funny because like they'd sort of go, "How do you not know what pot is?" Like,
Yeah,
or whatever.
yeah.
Um, I'm sure I was entertaining, but they genuinely liked me and they appreciated my naivety, and helped me to work out who I was, I think,
Mm.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that a cute story?
It is beautiful.
It's so
When you said it,
lovely.
I actually got a bit teary because I was like, that's actually so beautiful. And it's like there's such a layer
Yeah,
underneath that of
I
like,
know.
let's not actually judge people
Yeah,
based on, outward
absolutely.
appearance and not
100%.
expect, yeah, all of
Yeah.
that. So,
Yeah. It
um,
was definitely,
oh,
I mean, I learned a lot. That those 3 years, so year 10, 11, and 12, were the biggest learning curve of my life. It was like
yeah,
going from this Christian bubble out into the real world, and it was like the shock of a lifetime.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so what was those 3 years and sort of like moving out into, I guess, like the big wide world after high
Yeah,
school? What was that like for you in terms of like where were you at with your sexuality? What was that like internally for you throughout what we would consider like that identity forming? Like
yeah,
everybody's starting to have sex.
yeah,
People are talking about
yeah,
sex. Like,
yeah.
what was all of that
Oh
like?
yeah, that was a shock too.
Yeah.
Look, I I knew I was gay at
Yeah.
that point. And I remember at 15 I went to a youth group, and there was a brochure at the youth group for um it wasn't Living Waters, it was a different ministry, but it was an ex-gay ministry.
Yeah.
And I saw this brochure on a table while I was there, and I very secretively picked it up and put it in my pocket and took it home and I read it. And I kept that in a drawer, kind of hidden.
Mm.
And I knew right then, I was like, I'm going to call them. If I'm still gay when I'm 18, I'm going to call them. And I'm going to, um, and so at 15, I knew that I was gay and I was quite scared of it. And
Mm.
I spoke to a pastor about it um, actually at the first church, the Charismatic Baptist church. I went and visited and spoke to a pastor about it, and he prayed for me. And um, like, yeah, I guess I start like I that's when I like really started descending into the conversion practices movement,
Yeah.
because I was engaging with materials, um, and even online, I was looking up, ex-gay stuff to find out, how do people get healed? How do people change? You
Yeah.
know? So that was at 15. Um, at 16, I moved into year 11, went to a senior campus and met the first gay person that I'd met that was out. Um, and he was very handsome, and he was a year older than me. He was in year 12 and I was in year 11.
Mm.
And I developed a crush immediately, which was very difficult because I felt so guilty
Yeah.
for it. But I was just so intrigued by this person, because he was the first person I'd ever heard say, um, like, he wasn't ashamed of being gay at all. And I didn't understand that,
Yeah.
because all I felt was shame, and all I felt was, and like, you have to remember too, at that time, it was 2001,
Mm.
2002, 2002. Uh, and, back then, there were a whole number of things that were not equal, even in law in
Yeah.
Australia for LGBT people.
Yeah.
Um, like even Centrelink didn't like recognize gay relationships. And so there was this sense for me, anyway, I can only speak for myself. There was this sense that not only does the Christian world kind of reject gay people, and I wasn't really super aware of trans people
Yeah.
back then, but I knew that the church rejected gay people, and so did kind of the government, and so did society in general. It was like it was a negative thing,
Mm.
and that's how I felt. And so to see this kid he must have been 17 at the time, be so confident and happy. And I mean, I remember he used the phrase "my boyfriend," and I was like, "Whoa!" Like,
Yeah.
what? How he's got a boyfriend? Like, what? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Um, and that was really, I think it was important for me to meet him because, and yes, we did date for a very short, like 2 weeks, but it was the best 2 weeks of
Yeah,
my
I
life
love
at
that for
that
you.
point. I was very excited because he also happened to be the hottest guy at the school. So, um,
Yes.
you know, so yeah. But
Uh,
yeah, so that's where I kind of
mm.
started to get a different view
Yeah.
on homosexuality. Um, and obviously, the friends that I had made were kind of part of this alternative group.
Mm.
And so they kind of embraced him. And I ended up later that year going to drama camp and coming out at drama camp. So
Okay.
it's all very, a little bit stereotypical there, but yeah, I came out at drama camp and I was already struggling at church because I think, sorry, if this is too much information, just tell me to move on.
It's
But like
fine.
I think when so I can talk for hours, so just tell me because I do have ADHD, so I will
It's all
just
right. Same. We're a match made in.
oh great. So we'll be here till midnight.
Yeah.
Um No, I think I was really struggling with working out who I was. And
Yeah.
so I was trying on a whole lot of different things. And so, I became friends with these kids. And so I started to adopt some of the things they were wearing. And I started to listen to some of their music. I didn't really like it. I was a huge Spice Girls fan. Still
Oh,
am.
the mug.
Um,
Love it.
but, I was trying on these different things. So I started wearing look, I look back at photos and I'm like, Mum, why did you let me go out looking like that? And she's like, Dal, you thought you looked amazing. And I was like, okay,
Oh.
well, okay. But I started going to youth group and I remember having some fairly negative reactions from some of the youth group leaders,
Mm.
um, just about how I was dressing and about sort of, yeah, I guess I was starting to feel like I'd always felt like I was only accepted at youth group and at church because I was such a good Christian and because I was more than the other kids there. Like I was like, I would put my hand up for everything. I was like bending over backwards, trying to get, I guess, really, I was trying to get validation that
Yeah.
I was okay and that I was a good person and that I was liked.
Hmm.
And the way I got that was by complying with all the norms of church, but also by um, serving
Yeah.
a lot,
Yep.
like going to church all the time. I would walk there after school and like go and fold newsletters, or like I remember cleaning the church during the holidays because I was like there and I was like, do you want me to just like, yeah, no, I'll do that. I'll do, I was that kid. Um, and when I stopped doing those things,
Mm.
and started to kind of try on a couple of different things, like different clothing or whatever, I felt the distance was immediate. And
Yeah.
I started to kind of feel very distanced from
Mm.
the leadership at church, but just I felt very judged.
Yeah.
Um, and so when I went to this drama camp, I was already in a place of really feeling like an outsider
Mm.
at youth group and at church. My friends at school, they were real. They were talking about real things. Like they were talking about stuff like like I don't know, like the issues that I came across with them. It was like I had friends that were, I think, like 15 living out of home.
Yeah.
And like, had like they told me they'd never had like a passion fruit before or something. And it was like that was shocking to me. And like just I don't know, I was coming across these things and I was like, this is real. And at church, it's like we're just talking about abstaining from masturbation and
Yeah.
about like we're talking about Jesus and we're talking about, not being lukewarm Christians and all these things. But I was kind of like, what about all this real stuff? Like, what about drugs? What about
Homelessness.
sex,
Yeah.
homelessness?
Yeah.
Like I was kind of like my friends had opened the real world
Yeah.
up to me, and I sort of it didn't feel like church or the youth group at that time was, I don't know, like I was coming up a little bit short
Yeah.
there. And so I started to move a little bit away. And so I went to this drama camp and came out and came out in a big way. And came back and told everybody because I
Okay.
was like, you know what? I'm just going to be loud and proud, and I burst out of that closet, man. Like I, yeah, um,
Okay, I'm going to ask
yeah,
a question here though, because you burst out of the closet, but I know from personal experience and from a lot of other people that we can come out, but
yeah.
it doesn't necessarily mean that we are affirming of our sexuality in that
Oh
moment, and
no.
it doesn't mean there is an absolute chaos and mass
Yeah.
amounts of pain and shame and all of
Oh,
the things that come after that. So,
yeah.
what was the window of time between, I guess, when you did have that big coming out to when you actually felt self-affirmed at home in yourself and in your sexuality?
A couple of decades actually.
Yeah.
So after coming out and stuff, I mean, there was stuff at church that sort of I felt really rejected, but I was also very indignant about it. And sort of
Yeah.
I was very like I was a little asshole too. Like I was angry. I think like I
You're
had
a
a lot.
teenager.
Well, yeah, I was a
Yeah.
teenager, but I was also a teenager that had kind of been in this like it was a pressure cooker really because like sort of stuck in this like bubble with all these things going on that were very scary and very like bubbling below the surface that I didn't know what to do with. And and all of a sudden I had these friends at school that were kind of like, you're okay, like, whatever. And so I was really angry. I was angry that church wasn't a place where I could be honest
Mhm.
um, about myself, and that if I was, that I felt that I would be rejected, and that,
Yeah.
I felt really, yeah. Um, I was angry. And
Yeah.
so I kind of, yeah, I guess I made a big thing of being gay at church because I just wanted to kind of rub people's face in it. Which is, very 16 years old of me, or 17, whenever I
Yeah.
was at the time, 17. And anyway, so uh, about 6 months later, my family took me to Tasmania with my brother, and we went and stayed in a Christian village down there to to do a Christian like conference that went for several days. But this particular Christian organization had actually bought up a tiny village in Tasmania. I don't know if you know who they are, but they had, yeah, so uh, this whole village was Christian, and it
Oh,
was quite bizarre. Um, they had like lots of rules that were called norms, and including like you know uh times that we had to be inside at night, and like no alcohol, no cigarettes, no whatever. And so we went down there, and I was not happy like because
mm,
even though, okay, so like I was gay, and I was out, and I was pretending to be really out and proud and fine,
yeah.
but on the inside I knew this was going to be short-lived, because I knew that I still believed in hell, and I didn't want to go there.
Yeah.
So I knew that at some point I'm going to drag myself back to church with my tail between my legs. And I didn't want to go to this little Christian village because I was a bit scared that that was going to kind of, I don't know, I was really uncomfortable there.
Yeah.
But anyway, after being there for about a week, I decided that I was going to be ex-gay. And I was congratulated by everybody there.
I
All
bet.
the leaders, or like it was, you know, they set me up with youth workers that were in Sydney, Christian youth workers that were working in Sydney, to have regular check-ins. Um, and uh, so I had Bible study every week with them, and I would go and help out at the youth centre that they were running. And I got that little pamphlet out that I'd kept in my drawer, and I started Googling, and I had gone to my pastor before, this when I was 16 and told him that I think I might be gay. I think this might have been the catalyst for me being a bit angry at the church, actually. I'd gone to him and said to him, I think I'm gay and I don't know what to do with it. And he told me it can change. You can be healed. And he introduced me to Ron Brookman, who was the director of Living Waters at the time.
Yeah.
Um, so I was 16. Um, and at the time, the pastor sort of said to me, and I really looked up to him very much. He was quite young. Um, and he said to me, we could, let's meet regularly and sort of, I can talk to you and whatever else. And like, honestly, at the time, I was like, I'm just desperate for like some sort of like affirmation that I'm okay and like whatever. So I was like, yes, great, let's meet. So I thought we were going to be meeting regularly. And he said, you need to tell your parents if we're going to do that. So I came out to my parents and then we never met and never sort of spoke about it again. And so I think that's where a bit of my anger came from
Yeah.
and sort of spurred me on to sort of come out and be whatever, because that happened just before I went on that drama camp. Sorry, I'm going the timelines.
Okay.
But yeah, anyway, so I decided that I was going to do this Living Waters course that had been introduced to me by Ron, and that I would do it when I was 18.
Mm.
So, but I decided that first I was going to go back and live in that little Tasmanian village for 6 months, and I was going to do, yeah,
Right.
6 months there. So I went and did that, um, which was interesting. I look, I loved it. I made lots of friends and I was super super Christian again, So I
Yeah, I
was
mean
like
that's like it
it was like
would have been
yeah, and
intoxicating almost.
I made friends and we sort of try and like sneak out at night after the curfew and all, just being
Yeah.
stupid. And it was fun. But there was a guy there uh who two guys actually who became my best friends.
Yeah.
And they were both blokey, and they were both so. One of them was 22. I was only 18, and he was muscular and like just everything that I wished that I was.
Yeah.
Very good looking. All the girls in the village were like swooning.
Yeah.
And he wanted to be friends with me, and I was like, that's great.
Hmm.
What? Me
Yeah.
too. Like, you know, but it was really confusing because like I had read sort of and heard I'd gone to like some Liberty Christian Ministries nights and stuff, and I'd heard from there that, when you're struggling with homosexuality, you're supposed to have male friends that like affirm your identity as like a straight male
Yeah.
and that you can have healthy relationships with. And so I was like,
Hmm.
wow, God, thank you for providing this. Like, this is great. Like, my conversion's already started. But literally, I just had like a massive crush on him.
Yeah.
And like, but like I struggled, like I berated myself over that and I
Oh.
struggled a lot with it because on the one hand, I was like, I really need this friend. Like, I need these friends. And on the other hand, I was like, am I sinning every time? Like, I
I
don't
mean,
know.
that's like torture almost. It's
It
like
was. And of
self-induced
course, the
torture.
OCD, the OCD went
Yeah.
nuts because then I was like back to praying, asking for
Yeah.
forgiveness every 10 seconds. Because if I looked at him and thought he's so good looking or whatever, I'd be like, oh my God, I have to, it was really confusing, very difficult. Um, yeah, it was a really confusing time. But
Yeah.
then at the end of that 6 months, I moved to Canberra to do the Living Waters course. And the reason I moved to Canberra was because I was encouraged not to go back to Sydney because that was where all my Sydney friends were, and that would probably not help
Yeah.
me with my, separating myself from gay, you know,
Culture.
yeah.
Yeah.
even though I'd only dipped my toe in it, like it wasn't even, but like it was like,
Yeah.
yeah,
They
get
didn't
away
want
from
you to dip
Sydney.
anything else in it.
Yeah. Oh Lord, let's not go there. But like oh, that's so great. I really just wanted to be able to concentrate on it and just
Yeah.
go somewhere where no one knew, everybody would have known, but
Yeah.
like no one knew, and sort of started again. And yeah,
Yeah.
so that's what I did.
Oh. And so, I mean, I think a lot of people have the assumption, and I know that it's starting to break down a bit now that,
Yeah,
conversion practices are you are going and you are engaging in a program or with someone or something like
yeah,
that. And so, and we know now, like we know that that's not the case, that a lot of
no,
conversion practices are self-induced and are internal and
absolutely.
all of that sort of thing. And so, how long would you say you were engaging in these practices, like internally and externally for?
It's really hard to know. So, I mean, my journey with I like to explain first, and I think it's really important to explain first, particularly with all the stuff that comes out of America, like in pop culture
Mm.
and everything about conversion therapy.
Yes.
It's really important. And I'm talking from an Australian perspective here,
Yeah.
even though this would be true for other places, but I'll leave it with just Australia. Conversion practices conversion practices have looked different at different times in history.
Yeah.
So we don't need to go into what it used to look like. We know that castration and all those things were part of it.
Yeah.
Um, so conversion practices have looked different. In the 90s, there was camps. There was,
Yes.
we go to, or like early 2000s, we go to a course, we do, whatever, or have an exorcism, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um, these things change. What doesn't change is the ideology that
Yeah.
underpins those practices. And
Yeah.
the ideology is essentially, and this has been backed up by the amazing research that came out of Victoria that was done over several years.
Yeah.
Um, World first, too, because it really looked at that ideology. So most studies and most sort of academic papers and things had looked at the practices themselves and
Yeah.
the impact of the practices, but this was like, no, let's talk about the ideology.
Yeah.
And that's really important because the ideology is essentially, um, it's nuanced and it can be complex, but essentially, um, uh, LGBT people are broken
Mm.
or disordered, or somehow their sexuality or gender identity uh, is not right. It's not
Yeah.
of God. And I'm not talking about sin.
Yeah.
Not talking about sin. I mean something is uh,
Not natural.
not natural, not of the
Yeah.
natural order.
Yeah.
You know. So that's number one. Number two, therefore, it can or should be healed, changed, or suppressed.
Yeah.
Um, Number three, uh, your LGBTQness
Mm.
is has cause, and the cause of it is negative.
Yeah.
Now, those causes can be a whole range of things. Some people think it might be a demon. Some
Mm.
people think that it's because you were subject to trauma as a child. Some
Yeah.
people think it's because your father or mother was abusive, or because they left you or abandoned you, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It has a negative causation,
Yeah.
right? So Um, and so the idea is if we tinker around in there and work out exactly what went wrong and what it was that
Yeah.
caused this problem, we can be healed or fixed or
And fix
changed,
it.
or we can suppress it
Yeah.
and we can suppress it more easily, or whatever it is. But there's this, that's basically, that underpins
Mm.
the vast majority of conversion practices,
Yeah.
this ideology. And so for me, I knew that in my Christian world, gay people were broken at, I mean, I want to say the age of 7.
Yeah.
Like I knew that. I just knew, and I knew that, they were disordered somehow. They
Mm.
weren't natural. They were not normal. you
Yeah.
know? So that was the start of me kind of being indoctrinated with this ideology.
Yeah.
Fast forward to when I was 12 and I overheard that conversation about demons.
Yeah.
And I already know that I'm broken. I already know that I'm disordered and not normal and that something's wrong with me. And
Yeah.
so now I know the cause. It could be a demon, you know?
Yep.
And then I get a little bit older and I start to read some more materials and I start to engage with people online who tell me, oh, what's your relationship with your father like? Maybe that's why, you
Yeah.
know? And so what happened with me was I was a young teenager and I was already being encouraged to unravel the fabric of my childhood, of my home, of my family, and to really just pull at this thread that was ever unwinding and undoing everything to try and find where's the stitch that was wrong? Where's the bit
Mm.
that really stuffed me up? You know, was it dad? Was it something that mum did? Was it because mum, I mean, I remember when I was going to at one uh, night session that I was at, they said that it was suggested that if your mother didn't breastfeed you, that was an abandonment, and that could cause an abandonment wound.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember calling up my mom and saying, "Did you breastfeed me?" So you start engaging with these materials and suddenly you've got heaps of causation. You've got heaps of reasons that you could be
Yeah.
because it's all rubbish, of course, because it's all part of pop psychology from decades ago or it's
Mm.
just made up crap. But it's so you start to really unravel and try and dig around to find the problem that can therefore either be fixed or can be examined or can be whatever,
Mm.
suppressed. And so I was doing that at a young age. I was doing that at 14, 15, but
Mm.
really intensely doing it when I started at Living Waters
Yeah.
at the age of 19.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can't even remember your question.
That's all right. Me neither.
Oh, love
Half the
it. Love
time I don't
it.
remember the question once it's out of my mouth. Um, I have so many questions. I am in my head, I'm already turning this into a two-parter, so it's fine. Don't
Oh
worry about the
God.
time. No, 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 I love it because I want to know about living waters and like I want to get to the good stuff. I want to talk about like, you finding space to affirm your sexuality and the advocacy and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But also I want to know
Yep.
about living waters.
Well, look, honestly, it's probably the least interesting part, I reckon, because Living Waters was a 6-month
Yeah.
program and it was once a week. We met. I've got I should have brought my book here anyway. I have a big manual,
Do you still have
basically.
it?
I've still got it. A Living Waters manual, and basically it's full of all of like what I would call conversion ideology. It's
Yeah.
just full of it. And so every week we would have to read a chapter beforehand. There was homework to do, so
Yeah.
questions and things. We'd come, we would there'd be praise and worship, and then we'd have a talk by someone who would be talking around the chapter that we'd been
Yeah.
delving into. And like honestly, some of the things that I heard, it just and like I was taking it so seriously, and I look back and I'm like, really? Really? Um, but then we'd separate into boy and girl groups
Mm.
with a couple of leaders, and we would then talk about we'd go around the circle talking about how we had stuffed up that week
Yeah.
or how we whatever. And I found it really frustrating because, and I don't say this with any pride at all, but like I never had anything to say because I was so, like, I was incredibly strict with myself.
Yeah, the
I
OCD would
did
have.
not, at that point, I did not even look at
Yeah.
guys that could be deemed attractive.
Yeah.
I had stopped or I was having trouble watching television because what if someone, like if someone walks in with their shirt off, that's going to be a big problem. So I was really careful about screening what I was watching. I was uh, very, like, I only had Christian friends again. So I'd sort of gone back into this Christian bubble. And like my celibacy was complete celibacy. I don't need to go into that, but it was
Yeah.
complete celibacy. And
Yeah.
it was like that for years.
Yeah.
And so I would go into these group things, and every week it was like going around the circle, and it would come to me, and I'd say, I really don't know. Like, I feel like I'm supposed to have something to say here, but I don't. Like, I know that I'm still gay. That's all it is. But I'm trying everything
Mm.
to change it. And, and so we'd talk about things, and then we'd be anointed with oil and prayed over. But there's a couple of, I do remember the distress of some of the other guys that were in the group when they would be confessing
Yeah.
slip ups, as they called them, or whatever. Um, and just the shame that they had. Um, and at the time, I'm ashamed to say now that I would judge and sort of be like, oh, they obviously don't want to be healed. Do you know what I mean? Because I'd be
Yeah.
like, I'm doing everything, you know,
Yeah.
and you guys come here every week and you've stuffed up. Like, I didn't say that, but that was my thought process was like, I am doing this 100%
Mm.
and God is gonna heal me, you know? But looking back, the shame that these guys felt, oh, and like at the time I thought they were big things, but now I'm like, they were such nothings. Like they were nothing,
Yeah.
and the stress and the self-hatred and everything, And I have to also say this, the leaders of Living Waters, I think, had good intentions. And I do say that. I know that some people will not like me to say that, but in my Living Waters experience, they weren't gay. They weren't ex-gay. They were straight men
Oh.
who had gone to Living Waters for other reasons because Living Waters wasn't just an ex-gay
Yeah.
ministry. It was about broken sexuality, which also included, according to them, you know, cheating and
Yeah.
like whatever else,
Yeah.
sex addiction,
Yeah.
whatever else. So
Pornography, that sort of thing. Yeah.
yeah, pornography.
Yeah.
So um these leaders they really did care about me,
Mm.
and they believed that they were doing the right thing. They really believed that they were going to help me be free, you know, when in actual fact, what was happening was I was getting bound up further and further and further the whole time, as I assume everybody else was. So, um, yeah, but that's basically all it was.
Yeah.
And so, and this is what I mean by when I say the practice that itself wasn't the
Mm.
damaging part. It
Yeah.
was the ideology that I was exposed to, but it was the fact that I'd been exposed to it for such a long time before that that
Mm.
I was then ready to just eat it all up. You
Yeah.
know, I was primed for it.
Yeah.
Like from such a young age, I had already absorbed it all, I believed it all, and so I was, you know,
Kind of
it was a very
hardwired into your
slippery
sense of
slope.
self. Yeah.
Well, and like pe people say, "Oh, why shouldn't adults be allowed to choose to do this?" And I always say because
It's not a choice.
the only reason an adult would choose to go through conversion practices is because they have been doused in an ideology that tells them
Yeah.
that they're broken and that they need to be fixed or that they need to suppress something or that they need to do this, and they believe it.
Yeah.
Over time they absorb it, and I'm also aware that not everyone that hears conversion ideology absorbs it the
Mm.
same way.
Yeah,
Like, I
absolutely.
mean, it's always amazed me. I've met over the years now, I've met a number of Christian queer people who, you know, they say, I'm not a survivor of conversion practices. And I say, okay, but you grew up with the ideology, didn't you? I said, yeah, but it just never stuck. And when I was older, I just
Wild.
left. I just left the church and I sort of thought, far out. it really there is a difference, you know.
Yeah.
Some people, unfortunately, I'm one of them, they hear these things and like for whatever reason, it's true and they absorb it and the things they're hearing are about them.
Yeah.
You know, I'm broken. I started to see myself through
Mm.
this lens.
Yeah.
And then there's other kids that might hear this stuff for 5, 6, 7 years and they turn 16 and they go, you know what? I don't want any of this. And they leave and they
Yep.
go and be happy and queer and whatever. You know, it's amazing to me.
Yeah.
And like even people who have gone through conversion practices or conversion therapy,
Yeah.
who maybe their parents wanted them to go or made them go, but it's like some people didn't absorb the messaging in that way.
Yeah.
And those people are better off
Mm.
mentally, of course,
Yeah.
um, than those who for whom the message is really stuck and sunk in,
Yeah.
you know. But it's a very interesting, it's so interesting. Like, um, yeah. Anyway, forget what I was talking about.
It's okay. I mean, I love this is why I like having casual conversations with people because we get to just jump around and there's no like
Yes.
linear need for it to follow a structure.
Yeah.
You said that Living Waters was the least interesting part
Yeah.
of that. Why did we say that?
Because look, yeah, look, there's parts of my story that probably people would think, oh my gosh, this can't be real. Like, honestly, this,
Yeah.
what? It's so colorful. It's so ridiculous. I like, I have had some really weird experiences
Mm,
um, in my Christian life.
yeah.
Part of that was, you know, after leaving Living Waters, I, about a year or two later, I joined a Christian ministry that was a band, quite a well-known Christian band. And my journey as part of that, as someone who was still putting themselves through conversion practices and really, you know, um, was wild,
Yeah.
was wild. And I, you know, part of me is still frightened to talk about it because I don't want to anger people and I don't want to, you know, but yeah.
Yeah.
I hope that one day I can and that I'll be able to talk about it more openly, but it just, yeah.
Mm,
Um, yeah. And you know, there's other, you know, I mean, I tried everything. I really did try everything that I could get my hands on to change. I tried, you know, obviously deliverance ministry, which is kind of like, you know, uh, exorcism, but for um, uh, oh my gosh, Protestants,
yes.
like Protestant exorcism.
Yeah.
Um, which, you know, of course, I was scared that something was going to happen. Nothing did.
Mm,
Um, but like I remember being on the road with this band and like I would if we were at particularly if we were at a Pentecostal church because I thought they believe in healing, they believe in like whatever. So I'd I would write anonymous prayer requests
mm,
about myself. I didn't write my name or anything, but just anonymous.
yeah.
Um, pop them into the thing so that I could make sure that I was getting prayer from every church that we went to. And we went to so many churches. And so like I would do that every now and then. I'd just to, you know, whatever. But my OCD was nuts. I was like, it's it's like my OCD got 100 times worse with the conversion practices because I was like so hyper vigilant. Like OCD, it makes you hyper vigilant about
Yeah.
things. You know, you're hyper vigilant about, I don't know, the way you move, the number of times you step, the whatever. And so I became my hypervigilance really turned to uh, to have like a it was about sin,
Yeah.
and it was about sexuality. I was I felt very deeply that my sexuality was so broken and so wrong that that anything sexual or anything that could be uh, remotely like related to attraction or you know whatever was evil and was from Satan.
Yeah.
And so I became really uncomfortable with my own body,
Mm.
without being TMI. I remember uh, I so weird. I had OCD, right? So I wanted to shower twice a day. But I also struggled very much showering because it would mean I would have to touch my body.
Yeah.
And I was often like terrified that I was somehow sinning by washing myself,
Yeah.
you know, um, not doing anything else, just washing myself. And like so I would be, you know, hyper vigilant about how I did that and like all sorts of things. And um, yeah, yeah, it was like I was really in a prison. Like it was like being in a prison. And I was trapped by my own mind.
Yeah.
And I do feel that that was really made very strong by conversion practices and the ideology that I'd sort of grown up with and that I'd absorbed. Um, I remember one of the things actually I wrote a short story for Lucas Wilson's collection of survivor
It's so
stories.
good. Lucas was on the podcast not too long ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, And so when I wrote the story, I didn't want to write something that was about some sort of like I could have written about exorcism, I could have written about anything, but I didn't want to do that because I was like, it's not about the practices. I want to focus on something that's not shock horror. And so I was
Yeah.
like, I'm just going to write about my experience as part of that band and just focus on one evening that was basically the story I wrote was basically a typical experience that I was having on the road. And I wrote about um, being being on stage and being like, celebrated and sort of everyone really enjoyed what we were doing and sort of, I guess, saw us as like great Christians and like we were these young people that were so passionate about Jesus or whatever.
Yeah.
But I remember vividly getting off the stage often and looking around at the church and just looking at the young people that were my age at the church and how free they were.
Mm.
They were, there'd be guys with their girlfriends and they'd be draped over each other and they'd be, they weren't scared of their sexuality in the way I was.
Yeah.
They were free to, you know, be be with each other. They were free to hold hands. They were free. I wasn't free to do any of that. And I was scared of that. And I remember looking around several times, um, and just feeling so alone
Yeah.
because there was no way that I could connect with any of these people. And my other bandmates they were all so personable and I could be as well, but like towards the end of my time, I was really struggling.
Yeah.
Um, and I just remember watching them and they would connect with the cool guys at church and like whatever. And I just couldn't. I didn't know how. I was very awkward around other guys. I didn't like to talk to them because just in case I would sin and like set myself back. And I remember this is what I wrote the story about was I would often um, excuse myself from conversations and go and hide in our tour bus. And I'd be sitting there and I'd be obsessively praying,
Yeah.
asking God to take it away, asking God to forgive me, asking God, to just, you know, even just to like, if I'm gonna do this ex-gay thing, and if you're not gonna heal me yet, how do I live like this? How do I still have friends? How do I still connect with other people? Because I was really losing it. I was losing it. And yeah, I just, yeah. Anyway, when I left the group, I ended up leaving the band, and it was very difficult to leave for a number of reasons. Um, I knew I had to, and I wanted to desperately, but like there was a lot of legalistic reasons and whatever else that I had stayed for over 2 years,
Mm.
and I was really unhappy, and came out of that, went back home, moved back in with my parents, and I tried to find a church, and I was like, I can't connect with people. Like it's like I'd lost in becoming so hyper vigilant and so obsessively asexual
Mm.
and obsessively like uh I guess repelling males in
Yeah.
general. I couldn't like I didn't know how to like make friends. And I was back where I was when I was, 15 and walking into that high school and not really getting it, not knowing what to do. And yeah, I remember I remember watching a movie actually. When I came out, I was like, I need to start watching movies again because I'd been watching Little House on the Prairie like a lot because I knew that it had nothing in it that was gonna like, that's
Nothing
crazy,
tempting in
but
there.
I watched that like a lot because I was yeah.
Mm.
So I watched Moulin Rouge and I was in tears by the end of it because I I was like, I want love. Like, I want that. I want to fall in love, even if it's only for a short time, even if I die, even if the person dies. I have to experience it.
Yeah.
And I actually went back to the church that I'd gone to youth group at.
Mm.
And I spoke to the pastor who had introduced me to Ron Brookman. And I talked to him about it. And he sort of said, oh, well, it's probably not a good idea for you to watch those movies. And I left and I felt so deflated and empty because I thought if that's the answer, I'm already doing it. You
Yeah.
know, if that's the answer, I'm already doing it. And I'd had a few people of late who I remember she's my best friend actually, but we were in the band together. I remember walking through Melbourne with her and towards the end of my time with that band. And, she knew like my struggle and she knew how hard I'd tried. And she said to me, um, one day she said, so how are you going with the whole gay thing? And I said, well, I'm still gay. Like I'm ex-gay, but I still struggle with the fact that I'm gay. And she said, oh, but have you really given it to God? Like, have you really actually given it to God? Like I feel like there must be part of you that's holding on to it because if it wasn't, then he'd take it. You just need to really give it to him. And it like I was
Mm.
speechless
Yeah.
because I didn't know anyone who had tried harder, and there
Yeah.
was no way I could have tried harder. And I was so upset that like this person who had been there for this journey, for a lot of this journey, and who knew my story and who like, you know, was thinking maybe Chris kind of still wants to be gay, and that's why God hasn't healed him, you know? And so that, and then this pastor, and like just a few interactions really like were weighing very heavily on me. And I was like, I know that I have done everything that I was supposed to do. Everything I've been told to do, I've done.
Yeah.
I've done more than that. I've tried to bribe God by giving all the money that I had into, you know, I've tried, repeated praying, repeated deliverance ministries, repeatedly, like just trying to starve it out of myself by like not looking at anything, and I was still undeniably same-sex attracted.
Yeah.
And I just kind of, I think I kind of cracked a little bit and I went a bit, I kind of went a bit nuts. And well, not nuts. No, I won't say I went nuts. I think I really was a shell of a person at that point. And
Yeah.
my parents were very concerned.
Yeah.
They had watched this decline from when I was a teenager and starting to do this ex-gay stuff. They watched this decline, you know, over several years to this point where my mum now, I've spoken to her a few times about it. She said to me, you were like a shell of Chris. You had stopped laughing, you'd stopped singing, which is like, if you know me, I sing constantly, and everyone thinks it's beautiful except for the people that I live with. So, that's how much I sing.
They live with you,
I
so
I'm
they have
joking,
to
I'm
just
joking,
deal with
but
it.
like I sing constantly. Like
Yeah.
I walk around work singing. Like it's just I can't help it. It's just something I've always done, even when I was a kid. I remember working at KFC and I'd be out the back
Mm,
washing scrubbing the things and I'd be singing at the top of my lungs because
yeah.
I don't know, just did. But I'd stopped singing, stopped laughing, wasn't making jokes anymore, which again, that's like central to my character. And like just I don't know, like just I'd become not Chris, and my parents had become really concerned.
Mm,
Um, and over a number of years, actually. Um, and so they, my mum, my mum took me out for coffee one day and sort of said to me, listen, how are you going? And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. Because I was really closed. Like I was not an open book.
yeah.
Um, and she said, look, Dad and I have been praying and we're really worried about you. You're not yourself. And
Yeah.
I was like, well, I'm not supposed to be myself, you know? I'm not supposed to be myself. And she said, well, about that, we've been researching and we've been doing a lot of thinking and reading over the last few years, and we don't believe that anymore. And I was like, what? What? And she said, maybe if God hasn't healed you, it's because there's nothing wrong with you. And you would think that that's the point where I go, oh, and embrace her and go, oh my gosh, thank you. No, I was very upset
Yeah,
because
I
I was like,
imagine.
first of all, you guys would like had encouraged me to do this for
This
a
is in
start.
me because of you. Yeah.
Secondly, I was like, do you not believe in the Bible anymore? The Bible's
Yeah.
pretty clear about it, and I went full evangelical and was like,
Yeah.
the Bible, the Bible, the Bible. And she said, look, no, you know, anyway, long story short, my parents helped me to um, slowly become okay with being gay and accepting it. And at first, it was very small steps, but those steps were short and fast
Yeah.
because it was like, okay, I'm not, I'm not going to call myself ex-gay anymore. I'm not going to lie about it. I'm going to start going to a church. And when I go to a church, I'm not going to lie and say that, you know, I just haven't found the right person or that whatever. I'm not going to pretend that I'm interested in any of the girls. I'm going to be honest and I'm going to say I'm actually gay. I'm not ex-gay, I'm gay.
Yeah.
And that's where it started. And
Yeah.
that wasn't me going, I'm going to be gay and be going around, but it was that I'm going to be honest about who I am.
Okay. So, honest about who you are, what does that recovery process look like moving from that point?
Well, like I said, it was short and fast steps.
Yep.
So for me, I after I decided that I was going to be like, you know what, I'm going to tell the truth, I'm going to be gay.
Mm.
You know, I'm going to say I'm gay.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I'm going to do gay things because I
Yep.
still think that's wrong, but I'm going to
Yep.
be gay. And then very quickly after that, it was, okay, I'm gay and um, I'm going to start looking at some affirming theology and
Yep.
find out what that's about. And then it was, I'm talking to my parents about what they believe now and
Mm.
why they changed their views on, and so I was getting closer and closer and closer. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh, I've wasted all that time.
Yeah.
You know, I've been holding on to something that was never going to happen. And one of the other catalysts for it was that I contacted a one of the ex-gay people that was pumping out some books in America. He was young. He was only a little older than me. And I was like, if he's been healed, that gives me hope because he's just a little bit older than me.
Mm.
And I contacted him and he was like, oh, look, maybe we could talk on Skype, you know? So Skyped with him a couple of times. And I said to him, listen, I really just need to know how long did it take you between starting this process and actually being attracted to women? And he was like, oh, well, you know, that's a complicated thing. And essentially, still gay,
It hasn't happened.
you
Yeah.
know? And that was actually the point where I was like, this whole thing is a lie.
Yeah.
And I started looking into it, um, realized that a number of ex-gays that had professed healing
Yeah.
um, were gay and were actually just suppressing their sexuality. And so all of these things kind of happened very quickly. I want to say in like a 6 month period.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, so that's kind of how it happened. And then, yeah,
I mean, what was the grief like at that point though? Because like you said,
it
I
was
imagine like that moment of like I've wasted so much time.
Yeah, it was that. It was, I've wasted so much time. I've wasted like my teenage years worrying
Yeah.
about this shit. And I've wasted my early 20s when I should have been enjoying myself and meeting people and like, just
Yeah.
being okay with myself. I've spent the whole time bound up,
Yeah.
not being a real person, basically. But it was more than that. It was also telling telling my friends, so the people who I'd surrounded myself with for the last 7 years,
Mm.
um, who all knew me as an ex-gay Christian. My bandmates that I had spent 2 years traveling full time with and living with, um, in bizarre circumstances, telling them and knowing that they were disappointed, but more than disappointed, it was like, oh, so you've decided to go back
You're
to what you
choosing
were.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, you know. And that was very hard.
Yeah.
It was that was painful because I kind of was at a point then where I was like, well, I've lost a lot of what gave my life meaning.
Yeah.
Or what I thought gave my life meaning was my relationships with these people, and also this. I was a Christian singer, and um, I was a performer that was like totally sold out for Jesus, and that I could go to churches and they saw me as this,
Mm.
I was a model Christian, and I lost that very quickly, and kind of didn't know what to replace it with, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, it was a very confusing time. Um, I started going to a church, but then when I actually really accepted that I was gay, that wasn't really compatible.
Yeah.
So I, yeah, I tried to find gay Christian communities, but it was really hard, difficult at the time. And um, yeah, I kind of, yeah, I guess I started working in the real world.
Mm.
I was, and started studying in the real world, and um, had got my first boyfriend, experienced things that I hadn't experienced before, um, broke up with my first boyfriend, and then sort of just started doing life. But I was not fully comfortable being gay for a long time.
Yeah.
And I want to say, even I'm 40, I just turned 40. And I
Mm.
want to say that I have only been very comfortable with being a gay Christian in the last few years.
Yeah.
It's taken that long, and it's taken um, a lot of hurt.
Mm.
Um, you know, one of the biggest things was in 2016 and 17, just before the marriage equality debacle. Um, I hadn't been at church for years because like for years, because it was just not a place that I thought I could find um, anyone that would kind of accept me. And so I still had my faith, but it was just a personal one, and I didn't want, I wanted to go to a church, but I also knew that I probably wouldn't be accepted. And I know that there are queer churches around, and I was aware of them and I tried them out, but like it just felt for me, and this is not ragging on them, because
Mm.
queer churches provide a safe place, a much needed safe place for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But for me, I just felt like I I want to go to a church where there's young families, and where there's old people, and where there's straight, gay, like whatever. I want to just go to a church where we're all different,
Yeah.
and where we're not all united by this one thing.
Yeah.
I want us to be united by our faith,
Yeah.
and to just, so I just hadn't been in ages, and I forget what drew me there, but I decided to go back to that church that the who had originally introduced me to Ron Brookman. And the pastor was still there, and he was lovely. He had apologized to me already for having
Mm.
made that introduction. He was aware, you know, his beliefs had moved on somewhat. Um, and yeah, like I felt like this could be good. And so before I started at the church, I spoke to him and I said, listen, I need to know. I went a few times and I thought I really enjoy it here. I said, I need to know that this is going to be a safe place, you know? And he said, oh, well, everyone's welcome. And I said, no, but I need to know that, I said, I know that everybody has a different opinion about gay Christians and about homosexuality and stuff.
Yeah.
But I just want to know that I'm not going to be considered like not quite there,
Yeah.
you know? I said, like, for example, if like I was a singer years ago, And so I'd like to know that if I come to the church for a year or two, there might come a time where I'd like to maybe join the worship team or something. Would that be a problem? And so, oh, no, I don't see why that'd be a problem. No, 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 no. And so I dove into this church and invested in friendships. And, I knew that, you know, there would have been a lot of people in the church that didn't agree with homosexuality, but it also wasn't a problem as far as I knew. And the pastor had told me that there was no official stance at the church about
Yeah.
homosexuality or anything. It was just, everyone has a different journey and everyone has a different opinion. I was like, that works for me. That's fine. Then marriage equality happened, and the whole country was like given permission to air
Yeah.
their horrible views,
Sure. It's an ugly
and
time.
and horrible, um, you know, untrue and fear-mongering views about LGBT people
Yeah.
and the slippery slope that it was going to lead to, and all the Save Our Children stuff came out again,
Yeah.
you know. And that was a very hard time. And I know that everybody in the community would understand what I mean when I say that.
Yeah.
Um, and then sort of not straight away, but I think it was partway through this thing. Um, I got an email from the pastor that was sent to everybody in the church, and basically saying that the church's official stance is that, you know, marriage is between a man and a woman, blah, 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 blah. And I read this email and I was like, I was shocked because I was like, hold on. I thought we agreed there was no stance. Like I
Wow, that
thought,
sounds pretty official to me.
yeah, I was real, and I read
Yeah.
this email and I was like, oh my gosh. So straight away I had my girlfriend um from church who I had been watching Drag Race with, and she'd talked to me a lot about how, I don't understand why the church doesn't just accept gay people, blah blah blah. So I was like, great. Texted her immediately. I was like, oh my gosh, have you just read this email from the pastor? And the response that I got was essentially, well, what did you want him to say, Chris? The Bible says what the Bible says. And I thought, oh my God, like I've been fooled and I have invested, you
Yeah.
know, I've put, I've made friends. I felt at home. I felt like this was where God wanted me. I felt like, and all of a sudden I was like, this is not a safe place. And obviously, these people don't see me as a Christian and don't, like, this is obviously not somewhere I can be.
Yeah.
And so I left. Um, and I did meet up with the pastor and talk about it. He said that, well, nothing's changed from my end, and I said, well, okay, let me ask you, if I wanted to join the worship team, you know, would that be a problem? And he said, well, we'd have to have a conversation about it. And I said, well, that's
That old
that's
chestnut.
that's different. That's different. So that really broke me, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I didn't go back there um, until last weekend. But I'll
Oh
get to
my
that.
gosh.
I'll get to that. I know. I told you. I'm a mess. I'm a mess.
Goodness.
Um, well, anyway, but the really hard thing for me was after that, right? So we got marriage equality,
Yeah.
and then that was 2017, and then very early in 2018, I started a change.org petition to ban conversion practices in Australia.
Yeah.
And without realizing that it would happen, it went like crazy.
Yeah.
Like overnight, 5,000 signatures. And then by the end of the first week, it was like 20,000 or something. Like it was just nuts. Um, and I started doing a lot of media. I would, I was on the Carl and Jackie O show. I was on the Today Show. It was
You
a
were everywhere.
whirlwind. It was actually nuts. Like
Yeah,
it was
you were
actually
everywhere.
crazy. It was actually crazy
Yeah,
because it was an accident and I
yeah,
had done it anonymously at first, but then it was pointed out to me that I had to make a choice and it was, if you want this petition to do something, you have to put your face to it.
yeah.
Um, and it was a big decision
It's a
because
huge decision.
I really wanted to remain anonymous. I was
Yeah,
very worried that it would affect my career. I was worried about a lot of things.
yeah,
Um, but I decided that this was kind of an opportunity that I had to take because it was the first time in Australia that this issue had actually made it past, you know, like a half-hour episode on TV
mm,
about an ex-gay person that everyone said, "Oh, isn't that shocking? I can't believe that still exists." And then they forget about it the next day. This was the first time it became like national, ongoing news. People wanted an answer. People wanted politicians to respond, and
yeah,
they did. It
yeah,
became a political, like, hot topic.
yeah,
And I knew that I just couldn't not.
yeah.
And so, you know, it was
I
like
mean, what was that like?
crazy.
Like we could talk about like the actual process and all of that sort of thing, but
Yeah,
what was that like for you emotionally? Because it was absolutely wild to watch from
it
from the
was,
outside. Like what was that like for you emotionally to do that process?
I was, I'd go through waves where, like, during the days, so I suffer a lot of anxiety, clearly, OCD, anxiety, all of that stuff. And so
Yeah.
I was functioning, I was okay. And
Mm,
I really felt at that point, not to get too spiro, but I did feel like God was like behind me and like this was like, I need to share my story
yeah.
because this is important. This
Yeah.
is still happening. I knew some other survivors,
Yeah.
or had met them before, and I was like, this must be a God thing because this doesn't happen
Yeah.
all the time. Like there have
Yeah.
been petitions in the past that got a few hundreds
Yeah.
in, like this was,
Why this
and
one?
and it wasn't. It was. I want to be really clear. It was nothing that I did.
Yeah.
Like I didn't do anything amazingly different. It's not. It was pure. Like it was right place, right time. I
Timing.
think it was just timing. It came. So the petition was published. I can't remember if it was just before or just after this was on purpose, a uh investigative piece came out by Farah Tamazen in The Age, which was quite amazing.
Yeah.
And that had people talking because it was a number of pages in a national newspaper, and people were like, "What the heck?"
Mm,
Then the petition gave people a way to respond, and I think that's why
yeah.
it worked. But I did feel like I have to do this. I have to see where it goes. I have to see if this can actually make a change. Um, but at the same time, I was very frightened about what it would mean for me sharing my story so publicly.
Yeah.
And it was like, it's not like I'd shared my story before on SBS and whatever for little things because I did feel that it was important that people knew this is not right.
Yeah.
Um, But this was different because it was like all eyes were on this topic.
Yeah.
And like all eyes were like on my story specifically, and it freaked me out.
Yeah.
And I remember at nighttime, particularly, I would have panic attacks and, you know, I felt overexposed. I
Yeah.
felt like, because I'm very honest in
I mean, you were the
interviews,
poster child, basically, like
well,
the equivalent
for a
of that
short
kind
time,
of thing.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, look, I don't, yeah,
Like for a
it was,
window of time. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I would say my story was front and center
Yeah.
for for a number of months
Yeah.
for 2018. Um, And I felt really heavy with responsibility
Yeah.
because I'm going to be honest, I had no idea what I was doing
Yeah.
because I've never done advocacy before. I'd never been on the radio before. I mean, never really, I'd never been on TV before. And suddenly, being interviewed about this, and suddenly I had the news wanting to talk to me, and I was like, it was just crazy.
Yeah.
And so that scared me. I felt like I have to get this right. Um, and so the only way I could do that was by being really honest.
Yeah.
But then what comes with honesty? So I would be very open. I was very open with my story. I was very, very, like there was pretty much nothing that I didn't say. Like I, I wanted to be really candid and open about, look, you need to see what's wrong with this. Have a look.
Yeah.
This is what it did. This is how messy I was at the end. I'm going to tell you very openly and honestly.
Mm.
And it's embarrassing for me, but I'm going to share it because I need to. I
Yeah.
need you to see. But with that, I think, yeah, panic attacks at night, particularly about have I overshared? Have I been too honest? Is this going to come back on me? And am I going to be unemployable? Am I going to be, I don't know. I didn't know at the time that it was going to be received positively.
Yeah.
Over the long term, I was very scared that I was going to end up having overshared and then no one's going to want to employ me and whatever else. Um, oh, hi, Lulu. Sorry, she's just
Oh my goodness,
enjoying.
she's so sweet.
Um, I was, yeah, I remember. I remember being quite frightened when articles would come out
Mm.
and having to I'd be reading through them really fast just to be like, what did I say? What did I say? I hope I didn't say anything bad. Like it was just anxiety and doing advocacy often don't go together, particularly if it's public media advocacy. It just doesn't. And I was compelled to continue, even though it was a real struggle.
Yeah.
Um, And it's really funny because people say, "Oh, but you look so confident and natural on TV." Like I remember people saying, "Oh my gosh, but on the Today Show you looked so comfortable, like you spoke so well." And I said, "Well, I've got to be honest. Directly after it, I had a panic attack and freaked out for the next 5 hours.
Yeah.
And then I didn't sleep that night, worrying about how it was going to come across, you know."
Yeah.
So it was very much that. And like you said, it was so um it was you know, you're doing Carl and Jackie in the morning, then 2 days
Mm.
later you were doing this, and then that night, someone from the radio. Then in the morning, I had all these people wanting radio comments for this article or that article. And
Yeah.
then of course, when it was actually really brilliant because some things couldn't have gone better. Like Scott Morrison,
Oh gosh.
he was the PM at the time.
Oh.
And there was this point. So, well, basically, actually, before I get to that, I should tell you about Nathan Despot because
Yeah.
I was struggling a lot with the advocacy, and you know, I was being I met people from, the LGBT community who were involved in advocacy in different issues,
Mm.
who were giving me advice that I now know wasn't great,
Yeah.
only because they didn't understand the issue.
Yeah.
Um, and so I got a Facebook message from someone called Nathan Despot, who I didn't know at the time, but he had been uh, he'd been running a support group for people of faith, queer people of faith, or, ex-faith, whatever, that involved a number of survivors down in Melbourne, in Victoria. And he had been sort of it was amazing what he'd done with this group of relatively small group of survivors had spent years kind of analyzing their experiences and like deconstructing their experiences and really understanding, I think,
Yeah.
what did we all go through?
Yeah.
What were the common threads? Like, what is this phenomenon?
Yeah.
And he was the first person to talk to me about the ideology behind conversion practices because till that po up until that point, I was saying that gay conversion therapy, you know, was a practice that should be
Yeah.
banned.
Yeah.
And I changed my tune very quickly after talking to him because I realized talking to him, I was like, this guy knows what he's talking about. And he said to me, I need you to know that the way you're talking about it isn't right.
Mm.
I mean, he was very nice about it.
Yeah.
The first thing he said was, I have to say like thank you because you've managed to do what no one's managed to do yet, which
Mm.
is bring this into,
Yeah, you brought it into the light.
whatever.
Yeah.
But he said, but now, like, I need you to know that you're doing it wrong. And I was like, oh my God, all my fears have come true. Like,
Yeah.
but basically we spoke for a long time
Mm.
and we over the next weeks like really talked a lot. Like we texted and spoke every day.
Yeah.
And he was basically helping me to deconstruct my experience and to like understand the role of this ideology,
Yeah.
and how that is what actually does the damage and like whatever else. And also talking to him about how can I, in sharing my story, not just be talking about myself, but be talking about all of us.
Yeah.
Because let's be honest, we don't need another cis white gay man telling his story
Yeah.
without giving a little bit more than that. And so he helped me to do that and to make sure that, that what evolved, I hope, in my advocacy was that it was um, always with other survivors in mind and wanting people to understand more than just, oh, it's terrible that I went through an exorcism. It's horrible that I felt that I had to go to living waters. It's, whatever. It's more than that. It's about, you know, um, how did this start?
Mm.
This started when I was a child in church, hearing
Yeah.
messages, you know, and that's true for a lot of us. And so I started to focus on that kind of thing. And so Nathan became this brilliant partner in advocacy for me. And he wasn't sharing his story publicly, but
Yeah.
um, he was very much behind a lot of um, helping me to prepare a lot for the way that I spoke about conversion practices in the media. Um, we were very distressed at the time because what was happening was the media was like, "Oh, conversion therapy. This is spicy, and everyone's interested. So let's get all the craziest stories that we can." And so
Yeah.
they started to,
Like trauma porn.
oh my gosh, it was.
Yeah.
It was. And which is the opposite of what I wanted
Yeah.
and the opposite of what we wanted and what most survivors wanted as well.
Yeah.
Because you
Absolutely.
know what? It's not representative at all.
No.
And it also misses the point entirely.
Hmm.
So we were concerned because a number of articles were coming out, and it didn't matter how many times we spoke to journalists or we talked to them in really nuanced ways or like whatever else. It was like, it would be like conversion therapy can include, and then it would be like electroshock treatment, castration, and all this. And I'm like, I'm reading these articles, and I'm like, that's not what we're trying to ban.
No.
That stuff's already illegal. Like, you can't do that to people.
Yeah.
So, like, you can't just strap someone down and like start poking them with an electric prod to try
No.
and rid them of gay spirits. Like, that's illegal. That would be assault. So, it was very frustrating because it was like the media was like all on this, like all about these crazy, like really historic
Mm.
conversion practice stories, finding stories from, the 70s and which they're important, but
Yeah.
we have to understand that they're historical,
Yes.
and we have to understand that this is horrific. We need to acknowledge that that happened,
Mm.
but we need to understand that story in
Now.
the context of the fact that it's now 50 years later and this is what it looks like now,
Yeah.
And so it was really scary because I was this is amazing. We've got the media and we've got politicians and they're both interested. But the media is telling the politicians that conversion therapy looks like this, and this. Basically, Boy Erased, the
Yeah.
movie, like,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what it looks like. And without giving more,
Yeah.
Um, and by the way, residential conversion practices, residential like conversion therapy
Mm.
places were uncommon in
Yes.
Australia.
Absolutely.
It's historic, right?
Yeah.
That's not what
It's not what
most,
it looks like
it's
now.
not what it looks like
Yeah.
post 2000. Do you know what
No.
I mean? So,
Mm.
but the problem was with the media and the
Yeah.
journalists that were focusing on like and using these examples as like this is the definition. This is
Mm.
what it is. This is what we're trying to ban, or what, sorry, what Chris Chabs and what these advocates and other survivors want to ban.
Mm.
No, it needs to be it's far more
There.
complex than
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so I was distressed. Nathan was distressed because it was like we've got to strike while the iron's hot, and the media is giving these politicians the wrong idea. And so we decided to write a statement
Mm.
called the SOJI. It was originally called the SO Survivor Statement, but now it's called the SOJI Survivor Statement,
Yeah.
which stands for Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity Change Efforts Survivors.
Yep.
And essentially, it was written by um, uh, people from Brave, which is the group that Nathan had run.
Yeah.
And so we wrote this statement together that laid out this is what conversion practices have looked like in Australia.
Mm.
And this is the messaging and ideology behind it.
Yeah.
This is what causes the harm. And like sort of we worked very hard on it. It was very nuanced, it was
Mm.
detailed and like yeah, it was a beautiful document, and we we made sure that so we sent it around to other survivors. We sent it around to um, Nathan's network. I didn't have a network, so I'm not going to say our network, but Nathan had a network of people. I had been, I'd spoken at like an Amnesty International event and had been talking to them about what we could do, and so we sent it to them for endorsement. And we got their endorsement. So, and Amnesty International endorsed it. Then we got a bunch of endorsements from different people, and we released it and sent it to Scott Morrison and about, I want to say, 40 or 50 other
Mm.
politicians around the country, including attorney generals and whatever else,
Yeah.
um, along with, I think it was, I think it was 65,000 signatures from this change.org petition by this point.
Yeah.
This was in August, and sent this along, and sort of basically we had listed this is what survivors want the government to do. Like these are our recommendations. This is the survivor-led recommendations for combating conversion practices in Australia. And it was dot, 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 dot. And one of those things was legislation.
Yeah.
There was a whole bunch of other things.
Yeah.
Um, and so back to what I was saying about how, some things you just can't plan, but they just work out so perfectly.
Hmm.
Sent this out, you know, um, and Scott Morrison, a few days later, was asked about it by a journalist. sort of said, oh, blah, blah, blah. And Scott Morrison's response was, that's not an issue for me. And well, that went nuts. I don't know if
Yes,
you
it
remember
did.
that,
Oh,
but
I
it was
do.
everywhere. I mean,
Yep.
even Charlie Pickering even did like a bit on it. And I didn't
Yeah.
even know. I was like, someone called me and said, you're on Charlie Pickering. And I was like, what? Turn it
Yeah.
on. And it's like, I'm there talking about what conversion practices did and like how whatever. And then they cut to Scott Morrison saying, that's not an issue for me. And
Yeah.
like them sort of making fun of that. And it was just this unbelievable moment where it was like, wow, like that wasn't even planned. That was just a really stupid response.
Yeah.
And that the way that things like that kept happening. There
Yeah.
was another time, I think it was after that. There was I can't remember the event. I'd have to look through. I've got
Mm.
all uh, you know, I've got like a lot of articles and notes and stuff about it that I
Yeah.
collected years ago just because I wanted to remember how it happened. But there was a number of things that happened like that where it was like, that was an own goal, like, and it wasn't through any strategizing by myself or anyone else. It was just, and
Yeah.
like, I at the time, and I still do, I put it down to God. I was like, that was exactly what our campaign needed at the time, you
Yeah.
know, and it was so that people could really see, like, come on, like, this is ridiculous, come on. Yeah, so forget what we originally were
That's
talking about
okay.
again, but
I, as you just mentioned that, I was going to say throughout all of this, and even like in the last few years, like you sort of mentioned that, like the last few years is really when you've sort of been able to embrace that
yeah,
identity of being a gay Christian. What does your faith and spirituality look like now for you?
it's very different to what it was when I was 15.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I would
very
hope
different.
so.
Yes, it's very different. So, I don't know. I've been on a journey of, you know, I think the really sick part about conversion practices and about the ideology and just what it does to people who really absorb it is that it it really profoundly affected how I see myself
Yeah.
and see the world and everything. And even now at 40 years old, I've been out of the conversion movement for 16 years
Yeah.
and still, you know, I'm still working at undoing a lot of that ideology,
Yeah.
and the effects of that ideology on the way that I think.
Yeah.
Um,
There was a
I'm
reason
sure,
at the
yeah,
beginning of this that I said the word recovery because I don't
yeah,
ever feel like, I resonate with that very
no,
deeply and I think that it's not ever
yeah,
something that we will just magically make
no.
disappear.
I truly believe that this
Yeah.
will affect me till the day I die.
Yeah.
And I don't say that to garner sympathy or anything like
Yeah.
that. It's just a reality
Yeah.
that I know that that kind of ideology being laid down, laying its foundation
Mm.
at when you're young, if you really believe that and absorb it,
Yeah.
getting rid of that is like when I think back to all of the mental health stuff that I've gone through and the anxiety, I'm not saying that I wouldn't have been an anxious person regardless,
Yeah.
but no one can tell me that that didn't profoundly affect my, um, yeah, my OCD for one, and my, anxiety and all the other things that I've sort of struggled with,
Yeah.
um, profoundly. Like those things it, it was like fuel for it, you know? Um, yeah, I do believe that if I hadn't absorbed that ideology at a young age that I probably wouldn't have OCD now
Yeah.
because a lot of people are able to overcome OCD
Yeah.
sort of throughout their teenage years. I was never able to. And I do believe that it's um, because of, my internalized fears and,
Mm.
everything else. Um, yeah, so my spirituality now, um, I thank my mum a lot for how I've developed in my faith.
Yeah.
I have never, not at any point in my life, have I not believed in Jesus as God. And some people will laugh at that, because, why would you believe in a sky fairy? I've had lots of people say to me, why would you believe in something that thinks that you're an abomination or whatever? And I'm like trying to explain to people that, you know, I can't believe in Jesus. Like, I can't not believe in Jesus, like, any more than I can not believe that the sky's blue. Do
Yeah.
you know what I mean? I just believe it. And I believe that I have a relationship with him and I love him. But, and that's been true for me throughout. I've been angry with him and I've questioned and I've whatever, but I've never not believed. And
Yeah.
so it's that's why I kind of felt like, this is not a choice. I can't change my sexuality, but I also can't change my faith. I believe it with all my heart and soul. So um, I'm really glad that I have the parents that I do,
Yeah.
because while they were also fooled by that ideology 30 years ago, they are also very flexible people. And I don't think they were ever fully evangelical.
Mm.
They're certainly not now.
Yeah.
Um, they go to a Salvation Army church, so it's
Okay.
quite traditional usually.
Yeah.
But they're very, very supportive of LGBT people, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, um, they, yeah, my mum stopped believing in hell years ago, and when she told me that, I was like, "What? Hell? But what? Of course, there's a hell." This
Yeah.
was like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, and that fear of hell was still, this is why I say, like, I
Mm.
feel like I wasn't really fully comfortable being gay till very recently being a gay Christian till very recently because, like, it's almost like I had to deconstruct, or like I had to challenge this image that I have had of God as this, like, angry God that, like, has to punish.
Yeah. The Punisher.
The
Yeah.
Punisher, you know? And like when I realized that hell doesn't exist,
Mm.
and like that was a journey too,
Yeah.
but now I do not believe in hell.
Yep.
I do not believe in hell. It actually opened my eyes to the gospel as I believe that it's meant to be.
Yeah.
Um, People throughout my life have always talked about the good news, and I always, honestly, always thought, is it?
Yeah. It's like, it doesn't feel very good.
Why is it good news that 90% of all humanity,
Yeah.
throughout history ends up in, sizzling forever,
Yeah.
like separated from God forever in an eternal punishment?
Yeah.
That's not good news.
No.
And so in sort of like challenging my idea of hell, and that kind of sparked for me this whole thing of like, okay, well, maybe I need to challenge how I look at the Bible completely and how I whatever. And so now I'm sort of like it's taken a long time, but I'm at a point in my journey with faith where I really, really believe that the good news that the Bible talks about and that Jesus offers, and that, that I always wanted to feel joy in but couldn't because I didn't know it was there,
Yeah.
is that guess what? Everybody makes it.
Yeah.
You know, I believe, honestly, with all my heart, I believe it. I believe that, you know, the Bible talks about um, Jesus coming for all of us,
Mm.
and that his work of atonement, his sacrifice, whatever, it it was for all of us. It was for everyone.
Mm.
And I really do believe that regardless of whether you believe in him or not, whether you hate him or not, whether you care or not, I do believe that everybody will be reconciled with God
Yeah.
after, after
Yeah.
whatever that looks like, you know. Um, I
So
really do.
joy in faith, like
Yeah.
there you've been able to find that joy in faith. And
Yeah.
has there been that same joyousness in being able to get say that you're gay and like that sort of like queer joy?
Yeah, look, it's been freeing. And I'm not going to paint this picture that everything's fine and dandy because you
No.
know what? I struggle very much with a lot of things that
Yeah.
are absolutely the result of going through all of
Yeah.
that conversion stuff.
Yeah.
You know, uh, it it has affected the relationships that I've been able to, like the romantic relationships that I've had, sex.
Yeah.
It's affected, I mean, so many facets of my life have been impacted by this, and I'm still
Mm.
doing the work to try and repair
Yeah.
that damage. And I probably won't repair it all in my lifetime, but um, I'm really grateful that I have the opportunity to feel free
Yeah.
in being queer, being gay, and just, yeah, I think in the last few years, it like for me, it's always going to be about reconciling faith and sexuality. That's going to be that's my thing.
Yeah.
And the last few years, I've come closer to that than ever,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, I think it'll be a continuing journey, but I can only imagine it getting better and better because um, now that I now that I kind of have accepted that God is not this angry God and that God didn't tell people in the Bible to like dash babies against rocks and he didn't tell
Mm.
people to go and, you know, slaughter all these people and take the women and the children and whatever. He did not tell them to do that. That is not God, you
Yeah.
know. Once I realized, oh my gosh, I don't have to believe that this God of love and this God that says that he is love, I don't have to try and balance that with this God in the Old Testament that
Mm.
seems so opposite.
Yeah.
I don't have to reconcile those two different beings because one of them is, I believe, a construct of ancient people who were writing about, like,
Yep.
you know, hey, you know what? I said to someone the other day, I'm sure that the Christian Crusaders would also have said that God told them to do a lot of things. You
Yep.
know, don't tell me that all that stuff in the Old Testament that, God told us to go in and do,
Mm.
like, I, no, sorry. And sorry, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't
Yeah.
make sense. And if it doesn't make sense, no.
Yeah.
And, but beyond that, it's just, you know, I no longer have to try and justify why this loving God is also this other thing because now I don't believe in that. And it's
Yeah.
just so freeing. And it's not like I've just gone, I don't like that, so I'm not going to believe in it. I actually really don't. And
Yeah.
I'm not deciding not to believe in it because it's inconvenient.
Mm.
I've just come to a new understanding. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if
Yeah.
I had known this all along, you know, um, and I don't think I have all the answers. I don't think that I know everything, but like I do believe that I know that, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and that has been, yeah, that's been the most freeing and probably uh, healing thing for me in the last few years,
Yeah.
just in that trying to reconcile sexuality and faith.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am going to start wrapping things up because otherwise we will be here until midnight. Because I could ask many more questions, but I'm not going to
I want
because
to
this
ask
is
you
really
questions.
um and I think that's a nice transition into what is always my last question that I'm going to
Yeah.
tweak a little bit, which is to offer some encouragement to people. But I usually just say, what would you say to someone who is fresh in their deconstruction or unpacking their religious trauma? But what would you say to someone who is in the place where you were 20 years ago?
Oh gosh. It's a bit of a hard question because I'd like to say a lot of things. I don't know that they'd be able, like, you have to be careful, but in a
Yeah,
perfect world, I'd like to be able to say to them, you are okay
yeah,
and you are fearfully and wonderfully made, and that includes your sexuality or your gender identity.
yeah,
And there is nothing wrong with you. You, God made you to be you,
yeah,
and it's the only way that He intends you to be in this world.
yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And He just loves you because God is love. He literally,
Yeah,
God is love. And so if it's not loving,
yeah,
if it's fear-based, it's not from God. Full
yeah,
stop, end of.
yeah.
Literally.
And I love
Yeah.
that because I love it not for any other reason than I want people to feel like, you sort of said that like not giving up, I'm going to derail for a second, but
Yeah.
like that not giving up your faith didn't feel like a choice, that it
Yeah.
just was,
Yeah.
right? And the biggest reason that I love the diversity that I like to bring on these shows is because I
Yeah.
want people to realize that they don't have to make that choice if they don't want to, that they
Right.
can keep their faith if they want to, that they are
Yeah.
not opposites,
Yeah.
that they can't, it's not incompatible. And so I love that for all of the people out there who are grappling in this space. Um, and sitting in the disillusionment and the disorientation of it all, and wondering if they have to give up that too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they don't.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I love
Absolutely.
that.
Can't agree more.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining me for an
Thank you for having
extraordinarily long
me.
time. I'm
I'm
so
so,
grateful.
I did tell you at the start, I talk and I talk and I talk, and you have to
No,
shut
I'm
me
the same, so it's just
up.
like always going to
Literally
happen.
that.
Thank you so much for joining me, and
No,
also
thank you
just
so
like
much for having me.
being so open and vulnerable. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's the
Thank
only way to do an interview, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. Thank you
Oh.
so much. I really appreciate you having me.
Thanks for listening to Beyond the Surface. If this episode resonated, challenged you, or named something you've struggled to put words to, I'm really glad you found your way here. You'll find ways to connect, learn more, and explore further in the show notes. As always, you are good, you have always been good, and your story matters always.